I sat and waited for my bride. She was the best thing that had ever happened to me, and in another 3 months, we were to stand before an altar and a huge audience to be married. I don't know how I managed to get her. She was just amazing, rich, smart, and insanely beautiful. She had 2 college degrees, economics and business administration. Her father owned the company she worked for, and they were very successful. She was a state-level beauty pageant winner. She was going to be my wife. I didn't care much about her money. She didn't have to work, let alone achieve all that she had achieved. She achieved it because she had a fierce drive. She was extremely goal-oriented. She had her life mapped out for the next 20 years. We met at a university reception. I had just been promoted to full professor and was the second chair of the department in the business school, which was something because I was only 36. I was probably going to be second chair for another 15 years, but that was okay. I made my parents, who were teachers themselves, incredibly proud of me. Beverly just came up to me after it was over. I was announced my promotion and position and introduced herself. It was weird. I consider myself mostly mediocre in appearance, unremarkable physically, but I have to say I'm pretty smart. I was one of the youngest in my field to earn a doctorate, and early on I started a side business in which I was available for consulting. I charged quite a bit of money from those who could afford it, and mostly gave free advice to hopeful startup people. Beverly walked over, held out her hand, holding a drink in the other, and simply said, "I'm Beverly Madison. Nice to meet you." "Hi," I said as we shook hands. "Mark Hofer, nice to meet you. I take it you're the Miss Madison from Madison Tech?" "Yes," she said, feeling some satisfaction at being recognized. "This is my personal assistant, Maddie Schweibel." She gestured to a smaller woman who stood slightly behind and to the side of her. The woman smiled at me and nodded slightly, waving a finger at me. This introduction and brief conversation led to my suggesting that she come in for counseling, which she encouraged me to do. The first counseling session took place a month later in a meeting room in one of MadTech's offices with 4 other people. They were trying to make some projections, and I was familiar with what they were looking for. That led to a second and then a third consultation. The third consultation led to Beverly and I having dinner at her expense. That dinner led to another dinner, but without counseling. I was then invited to a 2-day technical show featuring her where she was treated like royalty, and I happily followed. The evening was an early dinner, museum visits, dancing, and real affection for each other. The only obstacle was her entourage that accompanied her everywhere. Then we started going out to dinners and doing things without her entourage, and things got more interesting. A year later, and after much prodding on her part, I asked her to marry me, and incredibly, she said yes. She knew what was going to happen. It was clearly her idea. She just let me think it was mine. She's such a sweet kind of evil CEO. So there I was, sitting in the Michelin star restaurant, waiting for her security guard Jeff to show up to give the signal, and then my bride-to-be was supposed to show up. 5 minutes before 8, I saw Jeff at the entrance. He nodded at me and I smiled back at him. He looked around the room. I noticed his lips move slightly. Then he stepped back and spoke to the manager. At exactly 8 o'clock, Beverly walked in. She was dressed in a light brown pantsuit and a white silk blouse. Her hair was styled high. She wore minimal jewelry, her makeup was tastefully done, and she wore her preferred 2-inch stiletto heels. Her entourage followed right behind her. Maddie smiled broadly and waved at me as she followed Beverly. A man and a woman from her security detail separated halfway to our table and sat at their own, a respectful distance away. I didn't know who the second gentleman walking behind Beverly was. He must have been the new security guard. As expected, Maddie sat down at the table next to us, an arm's length away from Beverly. What I didn't expect was that the new gentleman followed Beverly to our table. I stood up to hold Beverly's chair, but noticed that the new security guard had started to reach for her chair as well, presumably to do the same. I smiled at him and he looked at me without the usual nonchalant but polite expression I was used to seeing. He looked slightly embarrassed. "Hello, darling," Beverly said, sending me an air kiss over her shoulder as I slid a chair under her. "Hi, beautiful," I said back, moving to my seat. At that moment, the manager placed an extra chair at our table. It was odd since it was usually just Beverly and me sitting at our table. The new security guard walked over to the chair, thanked the manager with a nod, and sat down next to us. "Hello," I said, extending my hand to the man, who was taller and had at least 80 pounds, 36 kilograms, more muscle mass than me. "Hi," he said in return, shaking my hand. "I'm Mikael Johnson. Mark Hofer. Nice to meet you." "Honey, Mikael is joining us tonight. I want you to meet him. He's going to be involved in our future," Beverly explained to me. "Oh?" I looked at Mikael questioningly. Mikael only smiled politely and looked embarrassed again. "I also brought the first draft of our marriage contract." She held out her hand to Maddie, who obediently placed almost a quarter of a stack of paper in it. I stared at the stack of papers she placed on the edge of the table next to me. I knew we'd need a prenup, but I'd never seen such a voluminous legal document. It was about the size of an old-style phone book. It's basically what we talked about, protecting the company and some of my assets, particularly the stock. "If we part ways, you don't get the stock or anything that could jeopardize the company," she explained, looking past me at the designated waiter to let him know it was time to approach. "Okay," I said, a little puzzled. "I'll have my lawyers take a look at it." "Sure." She smiled at me, then looked at the waiter who was the first to approach our table. "But I have something there that we haven't discussed. A few things." Beverly held out her hand to the waiter, stopping him from listing the dishes. "Part of it has to do with Mikael." I looked at Mikael, who looked a little awkward. Beverly made a go-ahead gesture to the waiter, and he told us what the chef would prepare for us. Beverly ended up ordering for herself, then for me, after which Mikael said his order in a deep bass. "Anyway, this is about," Beverly continued as the waiter left us, "the baby we're going to have, how to take care of it, and what you'll get when it turns 18. "Wait, what?" I asked. "Pay attention, I'm telling you." Beverly bestowed an indulgent smile on me. The patient and generally pleased expression disappeared from my face, turning into a concerned one. What I felt inside, why was I only now hearing about something like this? Shouldn't I have found out about it before? I mean, before I proposed, shouldn't I have known about it? "You'll raise the child, take care of him, and fulfill all his needs until he's of age. Then I'll take over, and then we'll draw up a new contract." I'm sure I was frowning now. This was so far from what I had imagined. It was so cold. The contract has requirements for the child's nutrition, education, and physical activity at every stage of life. "I'm afraid that's out of the question," Beverly told me, looking a little apologetic. "You'll have to move when he gets into the appropriate schools, but I'll cover all the costs and it won't affect you financially." "Wait," I said, raising my palm to signal her to stop. "This wasn't the Beverly I thought I knew." "What?" "The only problem might be your access to the baby when it's on certain campuses," Beverly said, ignoring my gesture to wait. "We'll resolve that issue as best we can, but you may have to live off campus in some situation." "Wait," I said, gaining more strength in my voice. I caught what I was being told and felt disgusted. So many ideas and hopes had been shattered while I listened to this woman emotionlessly go on and on. People don't act like this. "We expect the child to start Harvard in her 17th year, and we will arrange for you, the child, and the staff to live near the campus." Beverly still ignored my entreaties. "Stop," I said, leaning toward her. I rarely raised my voice, but in this case it was necessary. No more pressure, no more giving in to her. This was over. Beverly gets her way too often, and she could expect it, but with me, it was over now. Beverly closed her mouth and looked at me with mild surprise. She wasn't used to hearing that word. "What are you talking about?" I said, more like even asked. I was sure I had an idea of what I was hearing, but I wanted this woman to confirm it, just so I was clear. "The baby," Beverly said. "A baby we're having next year in May." I knew Beverly was planning everything, but this was ridiculous. "Stop being a CEO and talk to me like a fiancé," I said. "It's in the contract," Beverly said, looking at the approaching waiter with the wine. Obviously, she wanted me to hear the truth she wanted me to sign off on from someone else. No, that was unacceptable. I had to hear it from her. I held out my hand to stop the waiter, who stopped a few feet away from me with a confused look. "No," I said to Beverly. Explain. Beverly, who wasn't used to that tone from anyone, and certainly not from me, looked slightly puzzled. Mikhail looked visibly uncomfortable. This is the plan for the baby. Beverly spoke a little slower and gestured to the contract. It explains your responsibilities. Wait, stop right there, I said, not wanting to ride this railroad. Child is an incredibly cold way to describe what were once supposed to be our children. A look of mild confusion appeared on Bev's face. You already have a plan for our baby, I stated. For the baby you're going to raise, Beverly clarified. The baby, I repeated. Explain that first. Beverly looked more than calm now, which was rare. I'm going to have a baby and... A baby, I repeated, interrupting her. A baby, meaning not our baby, not my baby. I gave her a narrowed look. Well, I admit I'm embarrassed to explain that part to you, Mark. Beverly shifted into executive mode. Her posture changed from relaxed to more formal. I knew from past experience that this was where she hid when things got uncomfortable. But essentially, yes, the baby won't be from your genes. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the woman. She was looking at me with an even gaze, coldly, impartial. It has been decided that while you possess the high level of intelligence we desire for a child, that intelligence is also heavily influenced by your environment, and your line does not possess the physical attributes we desire. Who is we? I asked. I already knew, but like I said, I needed to hear it. My father and I, Beverly stated. So I'm supposed to raise a child that I wouldn't be the father to? I said with contempt in my voice. Beverly just stared at me, some subtle play of emotion sweeping over her features for a moment. Mark. She softened her tone a little, trying to get my attention. I'd seen her do this before. It was a tactic. I have a plan. I love you very much, but I want the child to have certain things that neither you nor your parents physically have. Oh? I asked, leaning back in my chair and crossing my arms. I want the child to be academically and athletically gifted. Eugenics, I stated. Exactly, Beverly confirmed, with a little scientific help. In your opinion, I don't have the genes for that? I said half-questioningly. It's not an opinion, Beverly stated. Although everyone in your family has shown outstanding intelligence for 4 generations, none of you have the size or athletic ability we'd like to see in a child. Have you researched us this far back in time? I asked. Actually, even farther back. But the records are increasingly incomplete, dating back to the 1800s. Beverly then signaled the waiter to pour the wine. So, you want me to raise a child whose father won't be me, I summarized. I will be responsible for its upbringing, education, health, and everything after you prescribe what you want to do? Essentially, yes, Beverly confirmed. No. Beverly looked at me with mild surprise. I'd used another word she wasn't used to hearing. We stared at each other for a few seconds. Mikhail's eyes ran from Beverly to me and back again. Mark, let me explain. Oh, there's more. Fine, I said. The sarcasm passed Beverly's ears. She doesn't encounter it often. My gaze shifted to Mikhail. I could see where this was going. He kept his eyes on Beverly. He had a studied look on his face. I'm going to get pregnant. It's important for my line to continue, Beverly explained. We think we can guarantee a male, which is what we're hoping for. It's a simple intervention we can do after fertilization. Fertilization, I repeated. Beverly just nodded. After I carry the baby, you and your staff will take responsibility for it. Don't worry, I'll still be around. But honestly, I don't care much for babies. I just sat there with my arms crossed. Mikhail looked at Beverly, concern read on his face. We have a chart of milestones for the child to reach as he grows up. You will be responsible for them. You'll have all the help you need. Don't worry, there won't be any costs, Beverly assured me. I made a motion with my hand, encouraging her to continue. I wanted everything, the whole story. Right now, I wanted to hear everything just once, to burn away all the love I harbored for Beverly. Whatever was left in the corners of my soul was going to burn away in the rage I now felt for her. At 18, I would take over along with my father if he was still around. We'll train him to take control of the business, Beverly said, reaching for the wine. Seeing that I wasn't reacting, Beverly continued. At that point, if you and I still want to be married, we'll draw up a new contract. If not, this contract spells out your benefits and severance pay. I'll admit it's a little generous. At those words, Beverly gave me a loving smile. You'll get a bonus of $18 million, $1 million for each year of the baby's life, on top of your annual compensation. I raised an eyebrow. How fatalistic. She didn't even believe in being together forever or plan for it. I wasn't looking for a temporary vacancy. I'd envisioned growing old with her. Not anymore. Of course, there are penalties for not keeping a schedule, but I allow for the possibility of changing it, Beverly said. You have a say. I do, don't I? Well, yes, of course I do. Now Beverly looked magnanimous. Your family are all meticulous planners, smart, and most importantly, you're all educators with a history. You all have a knack for communicating information. It's a valuable skill that is often underestimated. I would love for a child to learn it. I pondered this irritably for about 2 seconds. Who's going to be the father? I asked a little grumpily. I had a nasty suspicion. Mikhail will be the father, Beverly informed me without looking at the aforementioned man sitting with us. Mikhail sat with his fingertips touching and his elbows resting on the edge of the table. His look was both pensive and concerned. His eyes stared blankly at the center of the table. I estimated his height to be over 6'5", 196 centimeters, and he had the mass of a soccer player, but he looked athletically slender. His neck was wiry and thick. The sleeves of his jacket were very full. This was a man who practiced a lot. Why him? I asked, gesturing to Mikhail, who was now only looking at me with his eyes. Mikhail and I have known each other for several years, Beverly explained. He has a pleasing physical build to me. His family is historically athletic, and he's also quite intelligent. I lowered a raised eyebrow. Mikhail has a master's degree in civil engineering. His mother is an MD, and his father is an electrical engineer. His pedigree is also impressive. Mikhail cast a brief glance at Beverly, then back at me, as if he was interested in my opinion. I didn't make a show of it. "Do you love me?" I asked, my voice harsh. I wanted to hear that lie. "Of course I do." Beverly looked shocked and a little hurt by my question. "Then what's all this for?" I said, pointing with a gesture to the contract. "It's just an obvious fact that marriages don't work out," Beverly excused herself. "There are many factors, and I'm sure you're familiar with them. I have to protect myself, the company, and the baby. What if I refuse to sign the contract?" "What?" Beverly asked, confused by the question. "I don't care about anything in that contract as far as protecting your money or the company." I almost growled. "But the stuff about the baby? My role in that? Forget it." "I'm afraid that's out of the question, Mark," Beverly said, going into CEO mode. "I'm not your employee, Beverly." "No, you're my fiancé, but while there is room for negotiation in this contract, the basic terms regarding the child are inflexible," Beverly lectured me. "I refuse," I told her. A slight play of emotion reappeared on her face, but then she went back into CEO mode. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said. "I was sorry to hear everything you told me today," I said back. She sat down and thought for a moment, buying time by drinking some wine. After she set her glass back on the table, the waiter filled it to the proper level. "Why?" she asked me. "Because I wanted a child or two with you, my own child. I refuse to raise another man's child, especially one I now suspect you slept with during our courtship. I want to have a say in these children's lives, not be some babysitter you pay. I'm supposed to be your husband, not your employee," I explained stiffly. "We believe that a child is an important aspect of our lives and our future. We will plan it carefully and allocate a lot of funds for it," she told me. "And none of it will be up to me," I finished for her. "No, you will be involved," Beverly said. "But it would have to be approved." I leaned back in my chair again, not believing what I was hearing. "No, Mark, the contract is generous," Beverly said, looking a little upset. "I insisted on it, and they gave it to me because I'm a little frustrated with the situation, too. I think we've come to a good compromise, and after you consult with your lawyers, I imagine you'll find it not only fair, but extremely favorable." "Tough shit," I told her. "Excuse me? Is that a ring?" I pointed to the wedding band on her finger that had been in my family for 3 generations. "Take it off. It's mine." "Mark, marriage is a contract just like any other," Beverly said, her mask cracking slightly again with concern. "It makes sense to outline and define everything beforehand. You know that." "I'd like my ring back if that's okay," I said, standing up and buttoning my jacket. "Mark, please." Beverly was definitely not pleased. "I love you." I held out my hand, palm up. I continued to hold it. Hard as iron, Beverly's mask slowly lowered back down, and making increasingly confident movements, she removed the ring and gently placed it in my hand. I closed my fingers around the ring my great-grandfather had betrothed to my great-grandmother and felt its solidity. It was a simple gold ring with a tiny diamond in the setting. It wasn't worth much, but its value to me was much, much more than any jeweler could have assigned. There was no way this corporate ice princess was going to get it. She wasn't worthy. "I'm sorry we couldn't work out a deal, Mark," Beverly said, looking me in the eye. "I wish you well." I considered her parting statement. "I'm sorry for whoever you end up with," I told her, my voice lacking the venom I wanted to put into it. "I love you, Beverly, but it's—" I shook my head sadly. I threw a look of contempt at Mikhail. He gracefully assumed a shamed look. "Call me if you ever decide to become human," I said to Beverly, turned and left that life behind. "That was unpleasant," Beverly said as she watched Mark leave the restaurant. Mikhail's gaze was fixed on the table in front of him, between his hands. Maddie sat beside him, her face impassive as her job demanded. But secretly she was glad things had happened the way they had. She had a good opinion of Mr. Hofer, and as of today, she began to think even better of him. However, the pregnancy is still on the schedule, Beverly pondered aloud, perhaps even to Mikhail. After the European conference and getting help from the progenetics team, we might be able to replace Mark as the baby's guardian. She paused, thinking. "I really love him," she said quietly. "The second child would be his." She paused again. "If Father would let me," she finished. Mikhail stood up, looking around the tables and people around him as if seeking their opinions on what had happened in the future. He didn't notice anything on Maddie's face, but the waiter looked visibly uncomfortable. "Beverly," he said, reaching across the table and raising his wine glass. Beverly turned and looked at him point blank for the first time that evening. Mikhail drained his glass and set it back down. He waved to the waiter who came over to refill his glass. "I'm afraid you've lost my help," Mikhail told her. "I don't really want to do business with you anymore." "You can't," Beverly declared, her frustration evident. "You signed it." "Let the lawyers handle it." Mikhail walked around the table and away from her. "But we're done. I hated that you got involved with Hofer, but I went along with it because I loved you." He stopped and looked across the table at her. "I even resigned myself to being a father because I had hoped that someday I could win you over. I experienced a kind of high for a while, knowing that you would have my child, and you would make Hofer raise him." "Mikhail." "But Beverly," Mikhail told her, "you're a total bitch. My mom would disown me if I got involved with you." "And so would you." Beverly sighed. "Back off, you brainless witch," Mikhail said, following Mark Hofer's path out of this life.